So I did a video a couple weeks ago on responding to what I thought were some really strong arguments for the pro-choice position. And after doing that, I came across this video, which is what I think full of very weak arguments for the pro-choice position. So I wanted to respond to this just for fun. It's actually pretty old. It's from 2015, but it kind of resurfaced recently and regained some popularity. So let's just check it out.
Many.
So right off the bat, we have this title, Can We Stop Telling Women What to Do with Their Bodies? I kind of addressed this in my last video and in my writing, which I'll link in the description. Telling women what to do with their bodies, that statement presupposes that we don't have a separate human involved in this. And the pro-life position is that there is a separate human involved. There's the fetus, which we believe should have the same rights as any other person who has already been born. That's a whole other philosophical argument. If you don't think a fetus has the same rights or should have the same rights, then you have to decide why. I think the clearest definition of when we become a human, when we become a person deserving of rights, is conception, because that's when you have your brand new set of DNA. It's separate and unique from your mother and your father. You're a new individual. That's when your existence began. So that's the clearest line we can draw where you are now an individual person. If you want to draw it at birth, then you have to be okay with abortion up until the day before birth or the moment before birth. If you want it until consciousness or individual viability, independence, then you're going to have to your dates are going to get blurry. It could be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years because you are dependent on your parents for a long time. But I don't want to go through the whole argument again. All I want to point out is that this is presupposing that it's only the woman's body that's the concern here, where pro-life people see it as you have two bodies in concern. You have the mother's body and you have the child's body, and the mother can make any decisions about her own body, but we don't think that she should be able to make decisions that ends the life of another person, and we see that fetus as another person. Yeah, that was just real quick. These statements are not based in accurately representing our position at all, so just wanted to clarify that.
Many more hundreds of eggs are fertilized than become humans. Eggs get fertilized, and by that I mean sperm get accepted by ova a lot. But that's not all you need. You have to attach to the uterine wall, the inside of a womb, a woman's womb. But if you're going to hold that as a standard, that is...
Well, first of all, we don't hold that as a standard. We hold conception as a standard. Conception is a lot more complicated than just fertilizing an egg. Conception is the fertilization. Here I have an article from University of California, San Francisco, health.org. They describe conception. It's 4 general standards you need to meet. For one, sperm transport. The sperm must be deposited and transported to the site of fertilization. Egg transport. Ovulation must occur and the egg must be picked up by the tube. Fertilization and embryo development. Union between the sperm and egg must result. And lastly, implantation. The embryo must implant and begin to grow in the uterus. They go on to describe these. I'll link this in the description. But yeah, we don't define life beginning at fertilization. We define it at conception, which involves all of these steps. So the problem you're posing here isn't even a problem that exists under the definition of conception. But go ahead, sure.
To say, if you're going to say when an egg is fertilized, it's therefore has the same rights as an individual.
Not what we say. We say at conception.
Then whom are you going to sue? Whom are you going to imprison? Every woman who's had a fertilized egg pass through her? Every guy whose sperm has fertilized an egg and then it didn't become a human? Have all these people failed you? It's just a reflection of a deep...
Well, yeah, even if we did define conception as fertilization, which we don't, but then it would just be considered a miscarriage, and we don't prosecute women for miscarriages because there was no aggressor in that situation. It was just a natural thing that happens, unfortunately, and there's no one who who plotted to kill somebody at that point. It was just something that naturally happens, and it sucks. But yeah, you're kind of just you're misrepresenting what we define as the beginning of an individual life, and then you're not even really being consistent with how we see these things, because if this would be equivalent to a miscarriage, and in miscarriages nobody argues that a woman should be in trouble for having a miscarriage. So not really sure who you're talking to here.
Deep scientific lack of understanding. And you literally, or you apparently literally don't know what you're talking about. And so when it comes to women's rights with respect to their reproduction, I think you should leave it to women.
Yeah, well, that point, which is one that comes up all the time, leave it to women, that's presupposing that the fetus does not have individual rights, which, if you are presupposing that, you have to define why. Once you try to do that, it gets really hairy, and there's really no line that everybody agrees on where you do begin to have rights. Some people say it's viability, some people say it's brain function. It changes all the time, and none of those can be applied consistently across all humans. Conception can, and that's why I think conception is a superior standard to use. But yeah, you're really presupposing a lot there, and you're kind of skipping over the main core of the argument that needs to be had by just saying women should choose, women should have the right to choose, because you wouldn't say that in the case of a newborn, and the whole pro-life position is that fetuses should have the same rights as a newborn. Yeah, anyways.
It's really, you cannot help but notice. I mean, I'm not the first guy to observe this. You have a lot of men of European descent passing these extraordinary laws based on ignorance. Sorry, you guys. I know it was written, or your interpretation of a book written 5,000 years ago, 50 centuries ago, makes you think that when a man and a woman have sexual intercourse, they always have a baby. That's wrong. And so to pass laws based on that belief is inconsistent with nature. I mean, it's hard not to get frustrated.
Well, the argument that, it's not even really an argument, it's really an ad hoc fallacy, really, when you just point out that people making these laws are white men. The people who decided Roe v. Wade were white men, old white men. And Bill Nye, you're not very very dark-skinned yourself, and you're pretty clearly a man, so I don't know what gives you the right to speak on this, but these types of arguments are just so weak and so annoying. It's like, just address the arguments being presented and stop attacking the person behind them, because whether or not the person is a white man or a black woman or a trans black woman, the arguments are the arguments, and they're either right or wrong. It doesn't matter who's presenting them. I think we can all agree on that, right? So let's just grow up a little bit.
Frustrated with this, everybody. And I know nobody likes abortion, okay? But you can't tell somebody what to do. I mean,
that's presupposing that the fetus doesn't have rights. You can skip over that if you want, but it's a pretty core part of this argument that needs to be had, but sure.
She has rights over this, especially if she doesn't like the guy that got her pregnant.
Wow. Okay. So what if she gives birth to the baby, or what if she's 7 months pregnant and she decides, you know what, I don't even like this guy. I think I'm going to get an abortion, maybe 8 or 9 months, let's say. Would you be okay with it then? Or newborn? Would you be okay with her killing the baby then? If not, why not? And why is it different from a fetus at, let's say, 8 weeks? Why is it different from that? And that's the conversation that needs to be had. But you wouldn't, these arguments are, they're skipping past so much that needs to be talked about. It's kind of annoying.
Like, she doesn't want anything to do with your genes. Get over it, especially if she were raped and all this. So,
yeah, rape is an interesting one because it's really hard to have to tell a woman that she needs to take to term a baby that she didn't consent to conceiving. I think at that point you could make the argument. I'm still working through this argument myself, actually, but you could make the argument that that is a relationship that she did not consent to having. So the fetus really is there without her permission or without her her willing action. And in that case, maybe there could be a justification for abortion. But the other side of that argument, and I'm not sure which side I fall on this one, the other side of the argument says that the fetus is still a human, still a person that deserves rights, whether or not it was conceived in proper context. And I don't know, I could see that side because you wouldn't justify killing a newborn just because it was conceived in rape. But also, it's hard. I don't know. Maybe I'll make a better, more detailed video on that later.
it's very frustrating on the outside, on the other side. We have so many more important things to be dealing with.
Also, it should be noted that rape accounts for like less than 1% of abortions, so it's not really worth making it a law based on such an outlying case. I'm generally okay with exceptions for rape and incest, but that can't really be used as an argument to be pro-life on all accounts because 95% of abortions are for non-medical, non-rape, non-incest reasons. So, kind of a useless point to bring up.
We have so many more problems. To squander resources on this argument based on bad science, on just lack of understanding, it's very frustrating. You wouldn't know how big a human egg was if it weren't for microscopes, if it weren't for scientists who are medical researchers looking diligently. You wouldn't know the process. You wouldn't have that shot, the famous shot or shots where the sperm are bumping up against the egg. You wouldn't have that without science.
Yeah, science is good. I'm glad we have science, and I'm glad that we know these things. I don't know what this has to do with the argument of whether or not a fetus has rights or not, but if you want me to just clap for science for a minute, then yeah, I agree. Science is great. Glad we have it. Glad we learned these things from it. Sure.
So then to claim that you know the next step when you obviously don't is trouble. Okay, let me do that again. Let me just pull back. At some point, we have to respect the facts. Recommending or insisting on abstinence has been completely ineffective. Just being objective here.
Yeah, I agree. This isn't an argument about abstinence-only education. Yeah, no, I'm totally for spreading contraception as far and as wide as possible, making it as easily available as possible. Put it in your liquor stores, like put it everywhere. Maybe not literally your liquor stores, but make it way easy to access. Make it way cheap somehow. And yeah, do whatever you can to prevent unwanted pregnancies, because telling people not to have sex is obviously not going to work. And I think if you are against contraception, I think that is almost for sure primarily a religious objection, which I don't think we should make laws based on, even though I am religious. I don't want religion being used to make laws. And that's the only, maybe there's other counter arguments to contraception, whether it's condoms or birth control or whatever, but it's almost always going to be a moral or philosophical objection, or not philosophical, religious objection, which I'm not okay with. And I think increasing access to contraception will lower dramatically lower the amount of abortions that people have. So that's good on all sides.
Closing abortion clinics, not giving women access to birth control has not been an effective way to lead to healthier societies. I think we all know that, and I understand that you have deeply held beliefs.
Well, now we're off in a different conversation because this whole thing was supposed to be about abortion, but now we're talking about contraception, and I agree with you here, Bill. Like, what? Stick to the subject, man.
And and it really is ultimately out of respect for people, in this case, your perception of unborn people. I understand that. But I really encourage you to look at the facts. And I know people are now critical of the expression fact-based. But what's wrong with that? So I just really encourage you to not tell women what to do and not pursue these laws that really are in nobody's best interest. Just really be objective about this. We have other problems to solve, everybody. Come on. Come on.
Well, this whole thing about fact-based and science-based, facts aren't going to tell you what is moral or what is immoral. Like, science can tell you when conception begins, when a fetus is viable, when certain stages of development happen in a fetus's lifetime, but it's not going to tell you when it's morally okay to end the fetus's life, or it's not even going to give you suggestions as to what that point is. That's a philosophical conversation that we all need to have. It's not a science. It's not like some scientific discovery is going to lead to us saying, "Oh, well, now this is when we should allow ending a life." So the whole thing about pro-lifers being anti-science is not really a valid point, because you could be anti-science and have very strong philosophical arguments for why fetuses should not be killed. So yeah, this thing was filled with just very lazy arguments, ad hoc arguments. I think it's pretty easy to knock these down. I have another one that I'm going to go over. I'll do that in a separate video because this is almost 20 minutes long. Yeah, let me know what you guys think of these arguments. Did I address them fully? Did I skip over something? If so, then I'll address it in a future video. Thanks.